Hi everybody, it's meteorologist Joe Cioffi. It's middle of the week, Wednesday. Boy, do we have a lot to talk about. We've got the watches and warnings map lit up like a Christmas tree this evening. We've got this really complex setup that's going to be affecting a large area east of the Mississippi with snow and ice and heavy rain and flooding and who knows what else. Maybe they'll bring locusts in by the time it's all said and done. But let's first start off with the National Weather Service warning and watches map that's updated from just a few seconds ago. And look at the really large area of winter weather advisories with some winter storm warnings up through central Iowa, southeastern Minnesota, and northwestern Wisconsin. We've got winter storm warnings up for northeastern Nebraska. We have blizzard warnings up right along the Dakota-Minnesota border, and also a peppering of winter storm warnings across Montana with various winter weather advisories. We've got some winter storm warnings up for the central Rockies as well, and even up into Pacific Northwest. Winter storm watches are up for northeastern Washington and northwestern Idaho. We've got winter storm watches up also for parts of Indiana down through western Kentucky, through western Tennessee, southern Illinois. Watches also posted now for northeastern Ohio, western New York, extending actually into parts of central New York State. We've got flood watches up for much of southeastern New York, parts of northeastern Pennsylvania. And those flood watches actually extend up the Hudson Valley into parts of north central New York, and there are a few places that have overlapping flood watches and winter storm watches up as well. Flood watches up for southern New England from Massachusetts on southward. Winter weather advisories up this evening for northern New England as well as parts of upstate New York because of freezing rain. I just want to double check really fast. I may have misspoken on what's going on up in Washington. Let me just double check what those watches are. And indeed, those are, for some reason the color is different on these maps, on that particular map. They have winter storm warnings up for this area that's in the that looks like the bluish area. I'm not sure why it's in that color, but that's what it says. So we're going to kind of go along with that. So let me show you what's going to be happening here. And the forecast is very complex and very difficult, actually, especially for my neck of the woods. And I'll explain that in a little bit. But I want to bring up the Weather Service's ice forecast. And you can see how extensive the impact of ice is going to be from this. With a fairly large area. Now bear in mind that this is going to be ice, and in many cases it will be from ice to snow. So the snow will actually accumulate on top of this and not the other way around, nor is this going to be freezing and then melting away. It's not as if we're seeing a system actually running into cold air. We have the cold air coming down and the weather system moving up at the same time. So we're basically putting down a layer of ice through this large area that will ultimately be followed by some snow. And there are some places where the icing is a bit more significant, on the order of 1/10 to maybe 1/4 of an inch in spots, especially as we get up into upstate New York and New England. This area, the Northeast, this is going to be for Friday and Friday night into Saturday, while the other areas are going to be getting it obviously a lot sooner than that. Now here's the snow. Again, this is the Weather Service's forecast for snow, and we'll elaborate on this a bit further, but large area of accumulating snow back down through just about all of the Ohio Valley gets into this in terms of some snow, although the amounts as you go south and west are less, obviously. And then you get into the heavier 3, 4, 5 inch amounts, and then you start to get into the some double-digit amounts as you move toward the Great Lakes and on up into upstate New York. And again, this is actually ending 7 p.m. Saturday. Look for the southern flank of this to possibly shift to the south and east. I think that's on the table now. You know, we talked about this yesterday, that the question of whether the cold air was going to wind up being more important or not. And we started seeing weather models come along this way this afternoon. And I think that they are the ones that have done that are they're going in the right direction. I think that's where it's going to be. That cold air all through this winter so far, anyway, has been much more important than modeled, especially in the longer range. And you suddenly start to get inside 96 hours, and particularly inside 72 hours, that you begin to see where the cold air is more important. Now, here's the radar at the moment. You can see the snow moving. Just about the whole state of North Dakota is covered in snow. Also some snow up in western Nebraska, heading up into South Dakota. Seeing a little bit of precip breakout around the Great Lakes. Most of that's on the light side. We've got some showers off the Florida coast. We've got a little activity up in the Pacific Northwest, and also some snows back out through Colorado. But the radar is going to start to get busy over the next 2 days. So let me play out this whole scheme and show you what I think is going to happen. Hopefully, I got this thing, in my mind at least. I have, I think this is how it's going to play out. But we've been surprised before in both directions. So we'll start with the brand new GFS model run, and we'll show you the whole country so we can get a flavor of what's happening here this evening with that snow up through the Dakotas. You can see low pressure is developing in western Kansas. Not a whole lot of Gulf moisture is getting involved yet. We've got bitter cold air. And make no mistake, this is another bitter cold air mass that's coming down out of Canada. Snow extending up through Idaho and into the Pacific Northwest. It looks like some heavy snows into parts of western Colorado and in through Utah. So it's pretty much a busy wintertime map. Now, in the east, we have a ridge of high pressure off the east coast surface of the loft. So warm air is flooding the eastern part of the United States from south to north. It's not quite into the northeast yet, but it will get there. And you know it's warm air when you've got rain in the northern Great Lakes at this time of year. The cold boundary is to the west. So we really have to have two weather systems really are going to be at play here, and each one is going to push that cold air further and further east. So the first one really kind of sets up the second one. And as we move into Thursday, you start to see the Gulf of Mexico open up, and we get into rain that starts to develop from the lower Mississippi Valley on up into the Great Lakes. The first wave is now over eastern Lake Superior. You've got snows back through Minnesota and Wisconsin, and you've got this little stripe of ice that begins to develop across northern Missouri, with snow hanging back into eastern Kansas. Now that first wave is going to move pretty quickly northeastward up the St. Lawrence Valley and out. Notice the high is then coming down and kind of pushing in two directions. It's pushing east across the Great Lakes and into southeastern Canada. It's also pushing southward. So the front is literally getting stretched out. You don't have one well-developed system here. You've got, the first wave goes by with its energy, and then you have the lagging energy in the southern part of the jet stream that's going to form a second wave. Meanwhile, and this is for Thursday evening, some hefty snows start to move into the northern Rockies as that energy that comes into the Pacific Northwest tonight and early Thursday begins to translate eastward. So we've got a very, considering over the last number of weeks we've had a few stretches where it's been very quiet from coast to coast. This is actually looking busy for the first time in quite a while. So here we go with the second wave that moves up, and now that cold air pressing through the Great Lakes. Rain changes over to snow. You don't have a wide area of snow. It's kind of a narrow band, but the cold air is shallow near the frontal zone. So you're going to have this band of sleet and freezing rain down into western Tennessee, northern Mississippi. You see it here in the purple area, and then it runs up in through eastern Michigan, across Lake Huron, and on up northeastward into southeastern Canada. In the east, in the meantime, we're getting all that Gulf and Atlantic moisture running up the eastern seaboard, so rising temperatures, rain, some thunderstorms probably in the mix, and temperatures that are going to be rising. I know up for me here in the New York, New Jersey, Long Island area, especially from here south, I wouldn't be surprised to see a few spots get up close to 60 on Friday. Of course, that's going to melt a lot, most if not all of the snow away. And here's the question now, as we get into Friday night and Saturday, that cold air, you see how that high is kind of pushing across the top? It's like this finger is pushing into southeastern Canada. Cold air all this winter, one of the signatures that we've seen this winter is that cold air has wound up being far more important than what models have been showing, especially in the long range. Models have not handled these cold air masses well at all, and it seems as if they become more important as we get into the short range. And I think this is going to be an instance where the cold air could wind up being more important, and that may bring some questions up for places like eastern Pennsylvania, southeastern New York State, possibly northern New Jersey, might even extend down into Maryland, Washington, D.C., Baltimore area. The coast might be a different story. It may be too little too late with regards to the coast, fortunately, because we are talking here a changeover to sleet and freezing rain and not necessarily snow. But now we're going to go into early Saturday morning, and at this point, I think what I'll do is I'm going to tighten up on the northeast and show you. The new GFS is following the lead of the European this afternoon, which picked up on this, and I was trying to leave this door open to this possibility, but there's that wave. We're now at 1 a.m. Saturday, and you can see extensive freezing rain throughout much of north central PA, up northeastward through upstate New York. Generally, it's going to be north of I-90 and from Albany east, at least initially. And that freezing rain actually gets pretty far to the north up in Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. But that is it, and because after that, the cold air begins to collapse southward as the wave goes by toward eastern Massachusetts, and you start to see that freezing rain pushing into eastern PA and even down into Maryland and northeastern Virginia on the southern end. Snow on the northern flank of this. We go to Saturday afternoon, and then this system pulls away to the northeast. One of the things I want to watch for, among other things, and the GFS, by the way, is still warmer than the European. The European actually does two things. It has the colder air, the 32-degree line, and I can pull it up on the GFS. I can't pull it up on the European, but here's the GFS's 32-degree line. The European's 32-degree line is actually a little further east and further southeast here, and it gets it there sooner. It gets it there by Saturday morning. At the same time, it kind of has the precip lagging back a little longer, and I think that there's a chance here with the models sending out every run showing a weaker looking surface low. It might try to lag some of that energy back, so I'm wondering whether precipitation could wind up lasting longer than what models suggest, because even if it's a few hours extra, that could be problematic for some areas, and it might even introduce the possibility that we could see some mixing or a brief change at the coast. I think it's a long shot for the coast, but the inland areas, I think the odds are going up. So something we're definitely going to be looking out for here going forward. Now, in terms of accumulated precip, total liquid precipitation, you can see the GFS very generous here with 2-inch plus rains, even some 3-inch plus rains across parts of Pennsylvania and upstate New York, some showing up also in southern New England, and that's all encased inside a general area of 1 to 2 inches. And here's a wider view, and it looks like everybody east of the Mississippi picks up at least a 1/2 inch to 2 inches of liquid. This is a pretty widespread event. We haven't seen an event this widespread in quite a while. Areas that have been bone dry, at the very least, are going to get something, and they should benefit from this. So I think it's going to play out fairly well in terms of the liquid amounts. And of course, where there's deep snow cover and you're bringing rain, you are introducing that possibility of some flooding. Now, as we take a look at the snowfall, and this is where it gets tricky, because how much of this is snow, how much of this is sleet, and how much of this is freezing rain. This GFS map for snowfall also includes sleet, so you got to be careful here with the numbers. But you'll notice that, at least for the first time, this is about as far southeast as the GFS has had the snow area. If we assume that the darkest blue really kind of marks the leading edge of where we'll see some frozen precipitation, I'm not sure why it generates it down in the Carolinas. For some reason, some of this that's definitely an error here. But as we move out through time, what's up to the north, starting to see some smatterings here of some these darker blues, which would be a minimal amount in terms of snow, but that could very well be sleet or freezing rain. So that it's showing it now this far south and east, it tells me that the model's beginning to sniff out the fact that cold air is going to be far more important in this than what was earlier indicated. I'm going to jump out to the west to take a look at what's happening with the snow possibilities in the west over the next 5 days or so. And you can see it's fairly substantial up in the northwest and down in through the Rockies, the central and even the southern Rockies getting into it. The plains getting a few inches of snow at least with respect to the system that they're dealing with now. And where we have the winter storm warnings up, that narrow band through central Iowa, you could see why the GFS has that area highlighted, sort of a narrow band of 3 to 6 inch snows. So it's pretty interesting how this is all setting up. The upper air with all this, and then I'm going to take you into next week, because I think we're going to have another system to look at early next week. We'll bring up the jet stream, and there it is. And we're going to go back first off to the present time. And of course, you've got this energy that's out in the west that's coming east, the ridge in the east, which is the reason why we're warming up. Now, here comes that trough. And notice what happens. The southern part of that trough kind of separates. The northern part, which would bring in the colder air, is pushing eastward kind of on its own. And at the same time, you still have this ridge that's offshore grudgingly giving way. But by Saturday morning, it would have given way enough, that you'll start to get that cold air to bleed down toward the coast. Now, here's, again, my concern for my area is the fact that this energy is lagging back. And I'm thinking that might mean as we get closer, we might start to see these models show precipitation lagging back a little while longer while the cold air continues to bleed on in. Then, of course, that trough just kind of makes its way eastward. There'll be probably not much left with it, but that energy is still left. And now we've got this short wave that's beginning to try to dig down into the western lakes. You can see it here. This new trough carves out and dives down. And the question here, this is going to be for later Tuesday night into Wednesday, is there going to be enough room? I think a low is going to try to develop off of the North Carolina, Virginia coast and run northeastward from there. And I think it'll also produce perhaps some snow, although, again, big questions here with the trough. If it just kind of flips around and moves east and sort of progresses along, then perhaps all the development will be offshore and not have much impact. But we have already seen an instance where models started out that way and then wound up where the trough was further west and a lot deeper. So the fact that there's a rather impressive area of energy here being indicated by the GFS and also by the European. I don't want to leave the European out because the European actually was even more dynamic than the GFS, I believe. And, you know, it's got a pretty sharp trough here. Probably you could put an upper air low in western Pennsylvania near Pittsburgh, and then it kind of wraps that low up as it moves off to southeastern New England. It still might suggest that any important intensification from this would be a little too late. But again, this is day 6 and going into day 5 and 6 on the long range. I'm going to reserve judgment here before before we lay any verdict on this. I just kind of wanted to put this out there with respect to where things are going next week. It's amazing how, you know, even losing that Arctic jet, we are still seeming to find ways of creating some winter events here. Longer term, there's still going to be, I think, a little period of transition that we're going to have to deal with. There's some blocking going on across the poles, and I think that eventually, I think that what that's going to mean here is a gradual rearrangement of the chess pieces as we move through the 3rd week of January. And I'm still pretty bullish on the idea that we're going to see a reload of the primary pattern as we go into February. It may not be as extreme, but I'm thinking that we could see a reload of that primary pattern. And we'll have the GFS out here, and we'll see where it goes. And by the way, look at this. If this is right, you know, we start to have, it keeps wanting to make these deep troughs in the east. This is for this is way down in the long range. Of course, it remains to be seen whether this is going to be the case, but it still seems to want to do that. And again, you know, look at the action that's going on up in northern Canada here. It kind of looks like as we get toward the end of the month that we may, you know, see a bit of a reload. And I'm going to stick with that idea. I certainly don't buy the idea that winter's from the winter's over crowd, which has been paraded along by, I think, basically by frustrated snow weenies who believe that it should be snowing every day from November 1st to May 1st. Okay, Europe time, because I know Always Smiling, she might be watching, and I want to make sure that we get a little bit of Europe time in here. So let's do that, okay? And let's see what the models are bringing us as far as Europe is concerned. So, you know, the activity's been warm, but here's that approaching push of cold air from Greenland that moves into England and Ireland toward early next week. The models, you know, seem to be consistent with this with regard to some snows for Ireland and England. And you get that wind off the cold ocean, I mean the relatively warm ocean, it's cold air, kind of like the lake effect that goes on in over the Great Lakes and near the shores of the Great Lakes. So it looks like it gets fairly wintry here for a while there during next week across the UK. And after that, kind of slackens a little bit, so it might be, let's look at the upper air as to why this is happening. Let me back this up. Oh, that would do it. Okay, so, you know, you've got this, here we are at the moment, you see this big upper high that's up across northwestern Europe and extends up into the Arctic regions, and that's gradually shifting eastward into Siberia. And here comes that polar flow, a deep trough that moves into Europe. So that's going to really start feeding in some colder air. That's a very cold look here later next week across much of Europe. We'll look at the thermodynamics, we'll look at the temperature anomalies. And indeed, you know, you can see this large area of, you know, below normal temperatures. Not crazy below normal, but some places, a little, maybe we'll call the Alps crazy below normal. But even in England, you know, that's a fair departure here of below normal temperatures of looks like 4 to 6 degrees Celsius below normal. You know, that's a big deal. That's 10 to 12 degrees below average in Fahrenheit. Look at this as we move into Saturday and Sunday, the 20th and 21st. So it does have a pretty good solid shot of cold air. Your winter's not done yet, okay? To the Canadian Maritimes, because I don't want to, you know, leave our friends up in southeastern Canada out by any means. And we'll watch your weather here as we move forward. I'll make the map a little bit smaller just so that we can get the whole spot in, the whole view. All right, so you can see the date rolling across the top, starting with tomorrow, and it's pretty warm with that warmth in the east and that ridge off the east coast. So you've got you know, rain all the way up, but then you get into that freezing rain throughout New Brunswick. You can see the extent of the freezing rain in Maine, on eventually into Newfoundland, especially northwestern Newfoundland. Freezing rain getting very close to the western areas of Nova Scotia. Then that low pulls out. We start to get that colder air. Here's that coastal low, a wave that develops out Sunday, Monday, that passes close to Newfoundland. And then we have that coastal low for Tuesday, Wednesday, that winds up in the Gulf of Maine and then sort of spins around south of Nova Scotia and toward Newfoundland later next week and beyond. So it doesn't look like anything major here, but you're going to have some chances during next week as the pattern turns definitely colder next week across the eastern part of the United States. By the way, one of the things I want to show you too is I want to just bring up, before I come back and join you guys on the chat board, and here's the teleconnections, and they kind of caught my eye today a little bit. So you can see the volatility here, especially in the Pacific North America Index. It's right now spiking up from negative to 0. So this is, you know, the 12th is Friday, Saturday here. This is where we're dealing with this system here in the east. So you're getting this major spike in the Pacific North America Index from negative to positive, okay? And that is going to be critical. And then as we move into next week, along about Tuesday, Wednesday, you get the peak off the wall positive on the PNA along about Tuesday, Wednesday. So that's going to be in play right at the time that this system is going to be developing in the east. So that's important. At PNA, a strong positive PNA is favorable for storm development off the east coast of the United States. Doesn't tell you where, but at least it tells you that something could happen. Then we're going to have another crash in the PNA from sharply positive to sharply negative as we move into that third week of January. So that, you know, that change probably means that if it gets it's going to get cold next week, that the cold may pull out for a little bit as the pattern starts to adjust. The other thing that caught my eye is, well, two other things. First off, the EPO index, which all through that brutal cold air was sharply negative, is trending back to slightly negative. So this could be, you know, this is our weather for this week. Then it kind of goes positive, not crazy positive, but it goes positive, and then it sort of moves its way back toward the neutral line. All of this, by the way, now being joined suddenly by the Greenland block, the North Atlantic Oscillation, which up until now has been relatively absent in the gain plane, in the upper air patterns across North America. Suddenly looks like it wants to go from positive to neutral and then slightly negative, starts to go peak into the negative side as we move toward January 23rd, 24th. So I'm thinking when we get, you know, toward the end of the month, again, we're going to seeing these chess pieces getting rearranged, and ultimately I think it winds up for a bit of a reload. It may not look the same, though. It may not look exactly. In fact, I think it's quite likely that it won't look the same as what we had back in the last 3 weeks. But it will probably make for some fascinating times ahead for sure. So let me bring myself back up to the front, and let me close that so I can come back to you guys on the chat board, and let's see what you have been saying. So, good to see everybody here, by the way. I did jump on the chat with you guys sooner. Some of you were posting some questions. Who was it that pointed out earlier? Let me find this, because I want to give you credit. And, you know, naturally, it's always hard for me to find it when I need to. All right, but anyway, I'm sorry, but whoever it was, Scott Olson, I just found you. Okay, thank you for reminding me about this. I want to share this with you. You know, on Tropical Tidbits, Levi Cowan, whose maps we use and we know, and they're great. He's been doing some website upgrades, and he just added the German model. So if you look under global models, it's called Icon, I-C-O-N. And that is the German model. There's limited information available right now with regards to the maps. Not as many options as you have, say, with the GFS, but still, it's something, and it's more than what we have with the European. So I'm good with that, and that's great. He also added a high-resolution short-range model. I'm calling it the H-drops. It's I've been told it's as good as the it's a high resolution version of the RGEM model, and that's also, he had it on there, and I think he had to do some fixing, and he took it off yesterday and he put it back on today. So check those out on tropicaltidbits.com. Someone just asked also here too, Harry Kaklik, I can't pronounce that. I can't see it. Productions. The NAM model, still reliable or what? The NAM is going to be watched closely. I was hoping to get some clues with the NAM late this afternoon. Didn't quite go as cold as the European, but was trying to get there. But it is trying to show that lagging energy. So we'll wait to see what tonight's run does. But the NAM's been a good performer, so I'm going to be paying attention to it, and I'm going to be paying attention to the RGEM. And by the way, the GFS late this afternoon came in colder and closer to the European. I think I said that before, but in case I forgot, I want to make sure I mention it now. Let's see. Delvin wants me to shut 1 minute be enough to shut off the live stream and go to work. Can you stream until 6:59? I'll go as long as I can, Delvin. I can't go to 6:59, but I'll go as long as I can. James NASCAR, Jason Schaefer, hi to both of you. Trish and Lou, Winter Storm from Wisconsin, and you're in it. Good for you. Let's see. Rob Bass, Pensacola gets snow. Florida getting snow again. Well, not this time around, but you know, you guys have already had it a couple of times. I think New Orleans has had snow 3 times this winter, which is amazing. Let's see. Oh, you have to rub it in, Rad Chick, at Florida at 71 right now. Well, you know, at least here it's into the, we reached 40 today, which was good, and I'm going to at least get to the 50s to near 60 on Friday. Cynthia Guignardis, hi to you. Just, you got some ice and snow coming your way, so beware. Again, across the Ohio Valley, southern Illinois, on up through central Indiana, then probably changing over to snow before ending, and then back over through Ohio. Really, it's a pretty, you know, pretty active pattern that we're suddenly in. Thanks, Danielo Yakubov. I appreciate that. I'm the weather god, he says. Maybe that's really overstating it, but thank you. You're trying to live stream me and Andrew Pinheiro at the same time, Delvin? Oh my. Tell him I said hi. I can't jump on his live stream while I'm doing mine. Oh, Tom Adams out forecasted me on Winter Storm Grayson. Okay, great. That is the Weather Channel's name for it, which, you know, I really don't like the idea that they do that, but that's their business. Let's see. You wanted a clipper, Joshua Pan. Well, you're getting more than that now. But next week, with that system coming down, I think it might be more than a clipper. I'm kind of impressed with the energy aloft. I'm going to be watching that. You want 99 Wolves wants 3 inches for Chicago in the northwest suburbs like Schaumburg, Illinois. Let me see. Hang on there. They have not done anything yet with respect to any kind of watches. You know, I wonder whether you're going to wind up being a little bit too far north and west, and you're sitting there at 50 degrees right now. You know, I don't know. It might be a tough sell for you. You know what the problem is? That you're getting the bulk of the first energy is going by to your north and west, and the second area is setting up too far to your south and east. So I think it might be really pushing it as far as getting something substantial for Chicago this time around. Tom, you're getting too philosophical here, Tom Adams. You know, with all the global warming stuff and the mini ice age. Let's just kind of focus on the next 5 to 7 days. And Daniela Yakubov, well, the media always says that the world is going to end every day. Well, let's just say that there is a tendency for folks to take things, in the media world, to take things to their natural Armageddon conclusion. It's sort of like saying, like, I have a headache, therefore it must be a brain tumor. Okay, a lot of times it isn't. And by the way, I would point out too that just on this subject matter in general, you might, and I've been just a basic agnostic on this issue, and I'm going to remain so. But the one thing among many things that is bothersome to me is, at least so far, every dire weather prediction that has been made in the last 20 to 25 years with respect to global warming, climate change, or whatever it's being called at the moment, every dire prediction. Well, I'm sorry. Let me just rephrase that. Not a single one of those dire predictions has come to pass. So, of course, now we change the dire predictions to different dire predictions. The world is going to burn up. The world is going to freeze to death. The world is going to see no snow ever again. The world is going to see nothing but snow from here on in. Something tells me that the answers to both those possibilities probably lies somewhere in the middle. But I'm going to just kind of leave it at that, okay? And they're already, Jimmy Anderson, you're talking about the spring outlook. Where are you asking me about? I'll just tell you that from what I saw from the recent climate models that I looked at yesterday, that at least for the northeastern part of the United States, or anywhere pretty much north of 35 degrees north, back to the plains, has below average temperatures for February, March, April, and May. So just letting you know, that doesn't mean it's right, but that's what it has, and it is a flip from what it had a couple of weeks ago. And Franklin Taylor pointing out that La Niñas are usually cool springs in the eastern part of the United States, and that is indeed the case. So look, I know some of you are talking ice ages here. Come on. It's winter. It's one winter. It's 3 weeks in one winter that went to an extreme. So let's not go off the deep end yet. Okay? Oh, now we're talking about grand solar minimums. All right. Crazy positive P&A last night. Yeah, that's right, David Schwartz. And then the big time crash. These indices are going to change from day to day, so just bear that in mind. So there's going to be some volatility inside the volatility, okay? And it's going to really impact the day-to-day forecasting with some of these systems, especially from what we see early next week. Raymond Gulbalt, will this icing event be as bad as the last major ice storm in Capital District with major damage, or is it going to be in the middle? Well, you know what? I have to kind of go back and look and remind myself of that ice storm and you know how bad it was. As I remember it, that was pretty extreme. I don't know that this will be quite to that level, but any ice storm is problematic. Just from the fact that you're getting ice on cold surfaces, it is is problematic. Now, whether it's going to be, you know, something moderate or severe, let's wait till we get there. But the threat is definitely there. Do I think 2 to 4 inches up in the Catskills and Wyndham? I don't know about the 4 right now. You may go. You're going to go. I think you're going to go to sleet, freezing rain, and then maybe to some snow at the end. But you certainly could wind up with a couple of inches. If that cold air winds up being more important, and we get that lagging energy, Garo Vestas, I think that's. I think then maybe that's the way you might finish more up on the high end than on the low end. But you got to get that cold air to get in here faster, and you got to get that energy to lag a little bit. If those two things happen, then you might be in business. All right, so you know what? We're going to leave it here at that, as we're coming up on 6:45 Eastern time. So glad everybody was here. Thank you for the great questions as always, and we are going to keep our collective eyes on this over the next couple of days. And of course, when I say collective, I also mean my colleague Joe Rayo, who will be joining me on our Facebook Live tonight on the Joe and Joe Show. That's at 9:15 Eastern time. So join us on my Facebook page, Meteorologist Joe Cioffi, for that. And we will be back. I have a feeling I'm probably going to be doing some double live streams over the next couple of days with this weather event. But for now, let's just schedule our regular one tomorrow. Will be at 6 o'clock Eastern time. And we'll see what happens. If it starts to look like the weather here in the east is going to have, there's going to be a bit more impact. Reaver 501, does Joe Rayo wear a toupee? Trust me when I tell you that is all his real hair. He's always had a terrific head of hair, and he continues to have a terrific head of hair, although his is snow white. Mine is I still have some semblance of brown hair with some gray and white in it, and my hair is its natural color, okay, just so we're clear. My relationship with my haircut guy is sacred, as always should be the case. Okay, so but no, it's not a toupee, it's his real hair. A flash freeze, Tom Adams, is when temperatures drop rapidly to and below freezing, so that there's no time for any of the standing water to evaporate. So it just basically freezes almost, not necessarily while you're watching it, but it freezes pretty quickly. So I think there's a chance for that happening when some of the temperature drops when this front goes by in inland areas. It's pretty quick. You go from 40s and even some 50s down into the 20s and even some upper teens over a matter of hours. So that could cause, standing water to just pretty much freeze very, very quickly. So I think that is possible throughout parts of upstate New York and back over into parts of the Ohio Valley when that, after the front goes by and then the cold air pushes in. That's very, very cold air, by the way, that's behind there. We're talking below zero temperatures. It may not be as cold as the Arctic air masses that we saw in the last 2.5 weeks, but by a wintertime standard, it is certainly a very cold air mass that's coming down. So that's going to be the big player here in terms of how the weather turns out in the east this weekend. And then, of course, we'll see what happens with next week when that upper trough begins to swing around. All right, folks, have a great evening. We will see you tonight on Facebook at 9:15.